Our chief guest, Mr. M K Narayanan, will now address the gathering, and I invite him here.
Sarvashri T.S. Krishnamurti, Srinivasan Bhavanesh Deora, Professor Bhaskar Ramurthy, Dr. Sudarshan Padmanabhan, and Srimati Susan Koshi, distinguished jury committee member, Sri Arjun Ram Meghwal, Honorable Minister of State for Parliamentary Affairs, recipients of the iconic Sansad Ratna Awards, ladies and gentlemen, and dear students. I never realized that this award function would attract so much attention. I'm usually accustomed to much smaller audiences. I therefore stand before you conscious of the honor that has been bestowed upon me to be the chief guest at today's function. Thank you for the honor, Mr. Srinivasan. I wonder why I was chosen. And I suddenly realized when Mr. Krishnamurti was speaking that probably the reason is that I am possibly the oldest member here who has attended a major debate in Parliament way back in 1959. It was in 1959 when the first democratically elected government in Kerala, the communist government in Kerala, was dismissed, and there was a debate in Parliament. I just joined the Intelligence Bureau as a young officer on the Kerala desk, and it was my task to provide a kind of backup to the then Venerable Home Minister, Govind Vallabh Pant. And that was my first experience of Parliament. And from 1959, I think the last time I attended Parliament was in 2009. So I think I spent a 50-year spell, maybe, and therefore that's why Mr. Prime Point Srinivasan, who keeps all the data of all of us, probably chose me to be the year. Thank you again. The Sansad Ratna Awards, we've just heard, is an initiative of the Prime Point Foundation and launched in the year 2010 on the advice of the former President of India, but I always remember Dr. Kalam as my dear friend of many, many years because we were colleagues together before he became elevated to the role of the President of India. Our expectation is that every member of Parliament is an extremely high-performing individual. And I think all of us here will accept. There are exceptions, no doubt. But I really am amazed at the confidence of Mr. Srinivasan to choose from amongst them a select few based on what he calls quantifiable parameters. I think this is a Herculean task. It's amazing that successive jury committees, since the inception of the awards in 2010, have, however, managed to carry out this responsibility to the satisfaction of one and all, extraordinarily difficult in this day and age. I think it is a testimony to the highest ideals of public service which Prime Point functions and Mr. Srinivasan and his team are responsible for. Above all, I would say that it is an achievement that has very few parallels in our country. Congratulations, Mr. Srinivasan. To those members of Parliament who have been chosen for the 2018 Sansad Ratna Awards, I can only say that I am humbled in your presence. I stand in the utmost awe of your achievement. I celebrate as also take joy in this achievement of yours. My sorrow is that I can never get this award. I would, however, do the next best thing is to personally compliment each one of today's awardees, starting with my friend of 40 years, sir, Dr. Veerappa Moily, Sri Ratuhari Mahatab, Srimati Supriya Sule. She may not remember that I first met her when she had just got married. And there was a dinner at her father's house to which I was invited. So I have a very special pleasure in having been responsible for this. Shri Srirang Appa Barne, Shri Rajiv Shankar Rao Sathap, Shri Dhananjay Bhimrao Mahadik, Dr. Hina Gavit, and I compliment you as the youngest member of parliament, your woman member of parliament for this honor, and Sri Shantaram Lakshman Naik. To the organizers of the Sansad Ratna Awards, namely the Prime Point Foundation, I would only repeat what many of those must have said before this, namely that your initiative is indeed an unique one. Propelling and sustaining an idea of this nature cannot but have been a major challenge. That you have managed to avoid controversy testifies to your honesty of purpose, your diligence, and above all, and I think this is the most important, your comprehension of the microcosm of parliamentary procedures and practices. I commend you for your achievement. Before I venture to speak on certain issues regarding Parliament, which are not necessarily complementary like what you heard till now, I would like to speak a few words about the importance and the role of civil society in today's world. Far more than previously, civil society is beginning to play a crucial role in many areas. This currently extends to issues impacting democratic practice and conduct. Civil society institutions such as Prime Point Foundation are hardly a part of the government, the legislature, or the judiciary, but they act nevertheless as watchdogs of public property. Civil society today maintains a vigil on goings-on across the entire spectrum of governance and seeks to educate citizens on what is taking place. It is needless to explain here what we mean by civil society. Everyone knows that it incorporates a complex and interconnected network of individuals and groups drawn from rich histories of associational relationships and interactions. What is more important is to recognize the role that civil society performs today. Only a few days ago in this city, a serving Supreme Court judge, Justice Chalameshwar, uttered a grim warning in the course of a talk he gave on the role of civil society. I'm sure some of you must have attended this. He said, and I quote, that societies that were not vigilant risk losing their constitutionally guaranteed liberties. There were a lot of societies, he said, that had lost their freedoms because people were not vigilant. He then went on to affirm that, and again I quote, it is the role of civil society to constantly keep a vigil on all the activities of the state, be it the executive, legislative, or judicial activity. I think this is a role that Prime Point Foundation is performing to, I think, everybody's satisfaction. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, venerable parliamentarians who are present here, students and others, I wish to state that we live in a highly disruptive world today. This is a world that is increasingly inundated with fake news and post-truths. A new form of information warfare is in vogue today that even has the potential to undercut democracies. Add to this the upheavals that are likely to result from the advent of artificial intelligence, which is already changing the nature of everyday reality. At this time, liberal democracies everywhere are under great strain. Its core structures, processes, and attitudes are all under attack. Many existing premises are under challenge. Many have actually been eroded. There is also a raging debate about the utility and future of liberal democracy. In many countries, bitter disagreements have erupted on the basic terms of the political contract that have led to liberal democracy. We should therefore heed the warning that was given by a very prominent leader, namely the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, a few days ago when addressing the US Congress. President Macron said, and I quote, "I do not share the fascination for new strong powers, the abandonment of freedom and the illusion of nationalism." The quote ends. Coming from a newly minted, democratically elected president, there was a great deal of wisdom in this assertion. It implicitly contained a warning that democracy was being threatened by a new political orthodoxy, one that puts a premium on powerful leaders like President Xi or Xi Jinping of China or President Putin of Russia, to the detriment and disadvantage of democratically elected leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, this could be a dangerous trend. Inevitably, it tends to be accompanied by distorted propaganda that parliamentary democracies have become dysfunctional, and that this inhibits them from taking the kind of hard decisions that only a strong leader can. I therefore appeal to parliamentarians present here, as also to this very select audience, to recognize the danger to democracy that all this portends. I know that we have been talking about what parliament and democracy is capable of, but there are threats on the horizon. We must not think that as a nation, we are also insulated from such tendencies, and therefore we should take necessary precautions. Extreme vigilance is the only remedy to prevent this from happening. Parliament, in particular, acting as a conscience of the nation, needs to be especially vigilant about this danger to its very existence. The imperative need today, ladies and gentlemen, is for a strong, effective, and functioning parliament. This alone will help safeguard liberal democracy. This may not be as simple as it sounds, nor does it mean that it is the end to all our problems. The struggles to achieve our goal will continue unabated across many vectors. Parliament, however, forms the vanguard. If it functions effectively, the rest will follow. The supremacy of parliaments the world over was the result of several long, hard-fought struggles. We must not allow today's detractors of parliamentary democracy to gloss over this reality. When people slander Parliament today, they ignore or tend to forget how fundamental were the gains achieved through these struggles over the years. There is thus to be an unambiguous understanding that Parliament is fundamental to the functioning of democracy as we know it today. Permit me, ladies and gentlemen, to constantly remind you and all of us present here that our Constitution, from which our Parliament derives its mandate, is in many ways unique. Many of the younger members in this audience may be unaware that those who framed our Constitution possessed an inner strength and a spiritual mien that transcended the material. Our founders had to draw upon their inner resources on several occasions to frame this unique document. They believed in themselves, in their cause, in the people, and in the country. That is how we now possess the finest constitution in the world. I think Prime Point Foundation is trying to remind us of our great legacy of this past. Facing today's many-sided challenges, it is important that we remember this lesson. We need to follow the same path as our elders. We need to take steps to strengthen our parliamentary democracy. This is the only path available to us to achieve the goal of a stable, peaceful, and prosperous nation. Consequently, the dissonance that we see of late in Parliament and the disruption of parliamentary proceedings witnessed more recently can have a deleterious impact on the image of Parliament. Members of Parliament, I'm sorry to have to say this, must self-discipline themselves to adhere strictly to the rules and procedures for the conduct of business of the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. I'm saying this in the presence of the Honorable Minister, but I hope I can say that. Unfortunately, the tendency more recently has been to observe this mostly in the breach. The unhealthy practice of forcing adjournments of the two houses and even passing budgets hurriedly without any serious debate undermines the prestige of Parliament. Edmund Burke's observation, which the Governor of Kerala, His Excellency Mr. Sadashivam, quoted at this very forum last year, is very pertinent in this regard. Burke observed, and I quote, "Parliament is not a congress of ambassadors from different and hostile interests. It is a deliberative assembly of one nation with one interest." Prior to this, in 2016, Dr. Rangarajan, former governor of Andhra Pradesh and former governor of the Reserve Bank of India, had said, and I quote, "A debate or an issue has to be won by cogent arguments and not by raising the voice or by any other means," quote ends. Very recently, Shri P.J. Kurian, Deputy Chairman of the Rajya Sabha, lamented, and I quote, "In the last budget session, there was no debate, no discussion, and no decisions were taken. What happened was nothing short of undermining of democracy," quote ends. He observed, and again I quote, "Parliament is not for shouting or misbehaving. It is for debate, discussions, and taking decisions," quote ends. According to the Deputy Chairperson, again I quote, "In the absence of reasoned debate, people had started losing faith in the system. It is a responsibility of parliamentarians and Parliament to retrieve the faith of the people in the system." I think it is this that Prime Point Foundation is trying to remind us each year when it holds these Sansad Awards. I think we need to take this even more seriously than the fact that awards are being given to the performing parliamentarians. I end by asking the members of this distinguished audience to say that we stand at the threshold of a great future. Across the world, India is seen as a shining symbol of parliamentary democracy, addressing issues of consequence to the country and its people through reasoned debate, and taking into consideration diverse views and opinions. India has achieved all this by putting its faith in democratic principles and processes, in its people, and in the country's past and present. We must not therefore allow the present dissonance in Parliament to deflect us from the democratic goals and ideals that we have set for ourselves. We must address this issue with the utmost steadfastness and determination at our command. My appeal to the venerable parliamentarians present here, and specifically jury committee member, Sri Arjun Ram Meghwal, the Honorable Minister of State for Parliamentary Affairs, and those parliamentarians who have been honored with the Sansad Ratna Award today, to take this message with them and share it with their colleagues in Parliament, namely that any further diminution of Parliament's image would have grave and deleterious consequences for democracy in the nation and for the nation itself. Finally, if I might have your permission, Mr. Srinivasan, I think the appeal from this conclave to the representatives of Parliament here and everywhere needs to be that they take the message from civil society that what India desires most at this juncture, far more than higher growth rates or material gains, is a functioning Parliament, which is the bedrock of our democracy. Thank you very much.